Story 1. Am I the a-hole for leaving my responsibilities on my sister's wedding? My, female, sister got married on Friday. She and I are twins, so we're very close and best friends. She is child-free, and I have 2 kids, 3 male and 1 male. Obviously, she loves her nephews. She never mistreated them, but she is not a person who would accept being a babysitter for a day. She has never offered to help with anything, though it's her choice and I respect it. Not surprisingly, her marriage was child-free even for the family. She asked me to be her MOH, and I accepted. Maid of honor. I was responsible for a few things at the ceremony and party, nothing complex, but I asked another bridesmaids for help, so she was also on top of everything. My children stayed with my in-laws while my husband and I went to the wedding. About 10 minutes before everything started, I was there for 2 hours, my in-laws called saying that my youngest hit his head while playing with my oldest and that they were taking him to the hospital. I despaired. Even though they said he was conscious, my heart was not at peace, nor my husband's. So we decided to go to the hospital. I talked to the bridesmaid and explained everything I had to do. She accepted, and when it was time to talk to my sister, she had a meltdown saying that I couldn't go at the most important moment in her life, and I was choosing him instead of her. I got really irritated and said, yes, I chose my son in the hospital. I left with her cursing me. My son is fine, but he got 2 stitches without any internal trauma. They did exams, but we only left the hospital the other day because they preferred to put him under observation because he's very young. I preferred to stay away from my cell phone just like my husband had. When I got home, several calls from different people and I answered when I saw my sisters. She asked before how my son was, and when she learned that it was a minor injury, she started screaming, saying that I abandoned her at the most important moment in her life and that she was without a family in her own marriage, no parents and grandparents. I left my responsibilities to a person who did everything wrong and caused an embarrassment, and to make matters worse, I didn't even want to show up since my husband couldn't stay in the hospital while I would at least share this moment with her. She called me several names until my husband took the cell phone out of my hand and told her to F off. I really could have at least gone to the party, but I wasn't going to make it knowing my baby is in the hospital. I can't help but feel bad for my sister. Am I the a-hole? No. Your kids come first. And like you said, they were young, they were being rushed to the hospital, they were kept there overnight, and yeah, it turned out to be more of a minor injury, but you didn't know that at the time. You're not psychic. You couldn't predict that it was going to be a minor injury and therefore stay. And for your sister to throw a fit like that when your child is in the hospital, she needs to get her priorities straight. I understand weddings are important to many people. It's a very important day for them. But just because it's your special day doesn't mean other people stop mattering. And so for her to throw a fit like that and not be understanding is pretty gross. It's not a good look. And yeah, I'm sorry. She owes you an apology, and you most certainly do not owe her anything of the sort, you know? I mean, I'm sorry. That's just ridiculous. Story 2. Middle-aged Karen parked in the mother's parking spot and confronted me about how I'm not entitled to it. Hey there, this happened yesterday at my local Loblaws. Most grocery stores here in Canada have a few expectant mothers parking spaces that are intended for pregnant women or parents with babies to use. They're generally closer to the door, usually beside the handicap spaces or cart corral. I'm currently 7 months pregnant and was following a Lexus into the parking lot, and I planned to use one of these spaces. The Lexus ahead of me took this space. I didn't think much of it and parked about 4 to 5 spaces down from it. As I'm walking into the store, the woman in the Lexus, mid-60s, saw that I was very visibly pregnant and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize," and laughed at me. I'm hormonal, and it probably wasn't necessary, but I responded with, "You're obviously not that sorry since you parked in a spot you shouldn't have." She proceeded to get about a foot from me and scream at me, "F you, you're not entitled to this spot." I was caught off guard and started crying. Not proud of this, but the hormones are intense sometimes. Thankfully, bystanders don't like it when people yell and physically intimidate a pregnant lady, and about 5 people came over to rip her a new one, telling her she's way out of line and I'm the only person they see who's entitled to the space. One gentleman, my hero, actually called her Karen. She got back into her car and left. I just don't understand why she felt the need to confront me. Did she think apologizing for her intentionally crappy behavior would make her look less like a Karen? Like, I wasn't going to say anything. I just assumed she needed it because she had a baby or whatever, but she didn't. So that's my crazy Karen story. Mild compared to most here, but it was honestly scary. Yeah, I've definitely seen folks like this who park in ways that are just, completely disrespectful to everyone else there, be it parking in handicap spaces when they don't have any stickers and don't need it, or maybe they do. That's not a judgment call I can make from just on site. But, and taking up too many spaces. And for this, I think it's wonderful that there are these spaces for expectant and new mothers. But to take those because it's like, well, I don't see anyone else using it, so I'll take it. And then to only be like, oh, well, sorry, I guess you could have used it, huh? Like, that's not even really an apology. That's just like, oh, I would only not be a crappy person if I knew someone immediately needed this. As if expectant mothers couldn't come in a few minutes later and might have wanted that spot. It's just kind of gross behavior. And yeah, I'm sorry. The fact that you chose to joke back to this person, and what I would say is, cutting enough, but certainly not worth this woman getting up in your face and screaming with her friggin' I've just eaten lead paint stare, I'm sure. Like, I'm sorry. Just, I don't understand people like that. Just be a little more considerate. Oh my gosh, you have to walk an extra 3 seconds into the store, but you'll just make everyone happier? Gee, what a hard walk that must be. Story 3. Entitled Kid Chops Down My Tree Costs Her £500,000, about $700,000. It's been 2 years, and I can finally post about this. This is juicy, so get ready. Background information. We live in an old and big manor that has been split into 3 attached houses. The houses are about 150 years old and were built around 5 huge giant sequoias, which were about 200 years old. In the UK, giant sequoias are very rare, and the 2 in our garden upped the house price by about £60,000. We lived next to 2 really nice neighbors, one young couple and one old couple. The story. Unfortunately, our old neighbors passed away, so their child and her family moved in. Let's call her Jo. Jo was instantly a pain in the butt. We had been sharing chickens with the previous neighbors, and Jo agreed to keep sharing them. However, on her nights, she would constantly forget to put them away, so we would have to check them every night anyway. One night, her little brats thought it would be funny to open our personal duck pen in the night, which led to a mass slaughter. Later, the chickens went the same way. About 2 years ago, there was a storm, and one of her sequoias somehow fell over and died. They were distraught, understandably, but from then on, the jealousy started. She would constantly complain about how lucky we were to have 2 sequoias in our garden and how our sequoia was making too much shade in their garden. It wasn't. Anyway, we just thought it was Jo being a pain. There were a few dry threats like they will chop it down or maybe the next storm will blow it down. Until we came back from a holiday to France to find a huge 6-meter stump and nothing else. I mean, how the F do you get rid of a 100-foot tree in like 2 weeks? 2 of our old British oak trees had been crushed as well. My mom and sisters were crying, my dad was red in the face, and we had no evidence Jo had done it. She claimed that there had been a storm and she had to get rid of it. We had a security camera at the front of the house, but you can get in the back if you go through a few fields. We then were given an £8,000 bill for damages to her property, and to have the tree chopped up and removed the wood alone would have been worth a small fortune. We had lost all hope, and 2 weeks had passed when my dad came running in from the garden. We had put up a wildlife camera a few months ago and had caught everything. We got a lawyer on the phone and started our revenge. We got a tree surgeon out who said it was an original specimen brought into the UK in 1860, along with the two that were in the Elveston Castle Country Park. There were 218 around the UK, but only 60 now. He also told us to call out an engineer because the roots might be in the foundation, so when they rot, it could damage the house. Turns out we would need to redo the foundation. Then we took Joe to court and sued them for damage to property, trespassing, and lots of other small claims. The tree would cost $250,000 to have another sequoia that was 200 years put in and looked after. It's basically impossible. Plus the damage to the foundation, which was $200,000, and the two oaks, which were another $25,000. So with the smaller claims, it went to about £500,000, $700,000. They had to move out. And we have now paid off the mortgage, done a lovely loft and kitchen conversion, and have basically done up the house and gardens, as well as planted a 60-year-old sequoia tree in the back garden. We also had our kitchen counter and table made from the old sequoia. We now have a new lovely family living next to us, who we share chickens, ducks, and pygmy goats with. They're very nice, and I make a fortune babysitting their kids. Too long didn't read. New neighbors chop down original sequoia specimens that are 200 years old and are of the same tree as all the ones in every single place of note in the UK, ends up costing them £500,000, $700,000. Oh, so on one hand, I will say that the idea of this tree and the price of it being that expensive is absurd. It's so much money, and I definitely think that this lady deserved to be sued for something, but £500,000 or $700,000 seems like a lot. But I mean, the house foundation stuff, that you're not getting past, but boy oh boy, this sounds like a ritzy neighborhood, and I gotta put my biases against the richer people aside. Just stop it. But yeah, like, neighbors. Why do you always think you're going to get away with this kind of crap? And the fact that they not only chopped it down, but then had the audacity to charge you, to give you an £8,000 bill for, like, damages and stuff. Like, the audacity of it. Just so gross. Like, come on. Like, yeah, if you're not going to take care of the chickens and your kids are brats or whatever, blah, 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 fine. That kind of stuff sucks, but you know what? That's neighbor stuff, whatever, get over it. But to do something like that and think you're going to get away with it, like, just don't. Why do neighbors have to start fights? I always talk about on this channel how lucky I am, because the 3 people who are like properties joining into our house, or our property, are wonderful. We're so nice. We all get along. We help each other. It's great. And why would you ever want to start fights with those people? Because you're going to see them all the time and always deal with them. Don't. It's never worth it. And it's definitely not worth £500,000. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.